joining from today. I'm joining from very early myself over in America. I'm in Texas right now, so it's nice and early in the morning, but I'm glad to be with you. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. Let me see if I can do that. I believe I can. I'm
Yes.
going to be sharing my content through Miro today instead of a slide deck. So let me go ahead and copy a link so anyone with this link can edit. I'll drop that in the comments. I want to invite you, if you'd like to, you can jump over and actually join the content that I'll be digging through as we go through there. So let me open up the chat real fast, drop that over in the chat. And then as my co-facilitators, if a lot more people join, or if we have more join late, you might want to reshare that with them so that they can join in. So welcome everybody. Let me first kick off with where we're at. If you've never used Miro before, once you join that link, I'm right here in the meeting agenda area right after it says start here, right over here. And what I'm looking for is if you could come over and say, hey, what do you want to get out of our time together today? We only have a little bit of time. It's not very much, and it's going to go fast. This presentation, I've done it 4 times previous to this, and each time I've used about an hour and a half, including questions. So we're going to keep this short and sweet. I'm actually going to set my stopwatch so I don't go over on our time together. So here's kind of our learning objectives, what we're going to go through. But if you've never used Miro before, and I see 12 of you, 13 of you have already joined, if you would come over here, and if you hit the letter N on your keyboard, or I'm not sure if you're on a mobile device what you do, it allows you to create a sticky note. And if you could put a sticky note on this board and say something that you would like to get out of our time together. I'm just going to put in new ideas for retros. Right. So if you wouldn't mind coming over here and putting a sticky note, and then as I go forward, there's places for you to interact, for you to put sticky notes. I see someone made a big one. That's okay. You can shrink it down. And so as you guys could do that as we move forward, what it'll do is give us a living archive of our conversation we have together today. My hope is to give you what you want to get out of our time together and in the time that we have. So here's what I've got as an outline. We're going to do a quick intro. We're going to talk about retros. We're going to talk about 5 phases of retrospectives and how you can inspect each one. And then we'll do an outro and try to bring everything together so that we can have an effective conclusion. My hope for you is that you walk away with something new you can either implement in current retrospectives you're participating in, whether or not you're the facilitator, or I can give you a new way of maybe looking at the value of retrospectives. My hope is that as you inspect your retrospectives, if they've been stale, if they've been boring, if they've been not getting the results you've wanted, that some of the things we talk about here will give you some experiments to try to hopefully achieve more successful retrospectives. So if you want to, I see you guys putting some over here. I love it. I see effective retros, innovative ways to do retrospectives, make people understand the value of retrospectives, motivate people, especially, developers on the value. I love those. Keep putting those in. If you go to the right 2 boxes, you will see where are you right now? Retrospectives are always amazing. Retrospectives are good, but sometimes stale. They're in a rut, or we don't have retrospectives. And all you have to do is just hit the letter N. Again, you can create a sticky note, and you can put that sticky note wherever it resonates for you, right? So maybe they're stale, maybe they're in a rut, maybe they're always amazing, or maybe you don't have them yet and you want to get there. So if you would just drop a sticky note, that just helps give me some information as we go forward. All right, I want to start off with a quote that I hope you remember to take away from here. What is a successful retrospective? This is my take. There's a lot of other experts out there with a lot of great ideas, but here's my take. A successful retrospective is one where your team has good conversation. It's quality conversation. People feel heard, people feel able to express themselves, they're able to talk openly, they have good conversation, and you come away with at least one experiment to improve. So I'll repeat that a few times as we go through this presentation, but take that as maybe a yardstick and maybe hold it up and say, okay, my current retrospectives, maybe you're in one, maybe you're in many, maybe you're just starting. I see some of you putting yours in there. Take that and say, are we doing that? Are we having good conversation? And then are we coming away with one experiment at least to try to improve? All right, so let's jump into this introduction real quick. By the way, you'll see this Inspector Gadget theme throughout. If you've never heard of Inspector Gadget, I was just adding a theme to this presentation. If you don't know who he is, there's some videos on this board, which, by the way, this board will be available, this link. You please feel free to bookmark it, put it in your notes. You can come back to this board. I'll leave it available as long as I have this Miro account, so you can come back after this session's over and feel free to use any of the content I discussed today. And a lot of what I don't even get to. There'll be some stuff I don't get to. You can come back and access it then. All right, so welcome. I welcomed all of you here, explained how to create a new note, getting into the tool Miro. We've covered the agenda. So let's talk quickly about session feedback. I'm going to zoom out real quick and come over here to the left where it says end here. This is where we're going to close up, and I've got a space for session feedback, right? What you loved, what you learned, what you would change next time, and any questions that you might have as we go forward. This is where we'll come and close up our session today, but feel free as we go through the session, feel free to go over there and put some information in if you have a question or if you have some information you'd like to go ahead and preload there. All right. Okay, so here we are. This is me. Real quickly, give you a brief overview of me. I'm Isaac Garcia. I am a Director of Community and Retrospective Evangelist. I believe the future for companies, for agility, lies in having effective retrospectives. You can see my journey. I worked at the Department of Energy, Sabre. I got an amazing opportunity to meet Lisa Adkins and the team around coaching agile teams. I'm a member, actually a co-founder of a virtual online group, Coaching Agile Journeys. I'm also a member of the OLN Open Leadership Network. I'm very involved in both of those. I recently worked at AIG and then Retrium. And at the moment, I'm actually starting up my own content delivery service, retro.guide. And there's a link there if you want to go visit it. But my heart and my passion is to see the Agile community grow and retrospectives become effective. Now, why is that? It's because I really believe in them. The title there, Retrospective Evangelist, is true for me. I preach retrospectives because I've firsthand seen how effective they can be when done right. I've also seen how ineffective they can be when done wrong. And I'll give you a very quick story to illustrate the point. I was at my previous job at AIG, actually. I was there, and I met a team, and I came to them, and they informed me they had lots of people who had gotten Scrum certified. They'd taken some kind of online test, and they had their piece of paper from whatever website they'd gotten it from. And they told me that their teams are doing well. And I said, okay, well, tell me about these ceremonies. Tell me about this. I said, tell me about your retrospectives. And they said, the retrospectives. We're not getting a lot of participation in the retrospectives. And I said, okay, well, that's maybe something we should look into. Tell me more about your retrospectives. And they said, we're all very busy here. So what we do at the end of every sprint is the person who is playing the role of Scrum Master would send out an email to the entire team saying, hello, team, what would you start? What would you stop? What would you continue? Oddly enough, they didn't get back very many responses from people. What do you know? They weren't having effective retrospectives. In fact, they might as well have not even been trying to have a retrospective, as they were calling it. On the flip side, I've seen retrospectives where a team has wrestled with an idea, almost shouting because they were so passionate, but came away more unified with a clear vision and with experiments to try to focus on improving their team. And those teams got better week after week after week after week. So that's hopefully what we're going to get into here. The talk is inspecting your retrospective. And so hopefully as you, again, go through this, you come away with some ways that you can inspect your retrospectives. So let's talk about a retrospective overview. Why do retrospectives matter? What's the big deal with all of this? And I'll tell you, they matter because the world is changing rapidly. I don't have time to go into complexity theory, but if you look at how complex our world is with the interconnections of so many things, the web, different languages, technology, people, supply chains, just look at the recent pandemic to see how fragile the entire system. One change here can cause a ripple effect that you couldn't have perceived over here. Our world is complex. And so for us to be successful in a complex world, we have to be able to inspect and adapt. And how do we learn to inspect and adapt? We learn to do it by taking the time and the energy to step back from our daily work and say, if we were to do this again, how could we do it that's a little bit better? Now, a lot of times what we see in the past is we've seen this idea of best practices, right? You do things a certain way and you just rinse and repeat, do them the same way over and over and over and over and over and over, and it'll work every time. That's not true today. Even in the most simple of tasks, go to any task that you think of, because you exist in a changing world, I challenge you to think of one task that you did. Let me just take one, for example, of taking your kids to school, right? We've done that the same way. There is a best practice for taking your kids to school until COVID hit. Well, now you have to understand, do my kids even go to school? Do we do virtual school? What does school even look like in this new world? And the fact that that's changing, something that used to be able to be programized, right? I just do it the same way every day. Now we have to start investigating and digging into day after day after day to make sure we're doing it in a way that's the most effective. So why do retrospectives matter? Because each of us individually and every team that we work with should always be asking itself the question, what's next? How do we get better? How do we improve? And how do we adapt to our changing circumstances? And if you're not doing that, the unfortunate truth is you won't be maximizing your learning. You may have some learning, but you won't be maximizing your learning. And so what do I mean by that? Think about for a second a team, any team, and think of a team that is great at what they do, a championship team, a team that wins every time, a team that plays well together, a team that feeds off of each other, a team that is the top of their field. If you look at a team like that, they spend the time talking to each other, training, pressing, stretching themselves, trying to be better and better. Whereas you can look anywhere for mediocre, right? It's the people who say, I'm good enough as I am, an individual or a team. We don't want to be individuals, teams, or organizations that are simply good enough. We want to be always reaching forward for the improvement. Now, maybe you say, I don't know if I agree with that. I'm pretty discontent where I'm at. Well, you know what? That's okay. But I'm telling you, as the world shifts and evolves and changes, very quickly, what was good enough today will not be good enough tomorrow because the world's changing very rapidly. So that's why retrospectives matter. That's why they're important. So facilitation preparation, if you are a facilitator of retros, not just a participant, if you're a facilitator, it is critical that if you're leading a retrospective, you take the time to prepare for that retrospective. Now, unfortunately, that takes a lot of time. And that's the thing I'm trying to do with retro.guide. I'm trying to find a way to decrease that time. But it takes a lot of time to prepare for an effective retrospective. Now, if you say I'm a very skilled facilitator, I've been facilitating for years, you can decrease that time if you need to. But truly great retrospectives come from thoughtful preparation of an agenda that guides the team through 5 phases of a retrospective. Now, this 5 phases of retrospective, there's an article you can read about that. Really what this is talking about is guiding your team through an arc. It's a story arc. This is actually from a coaching conversation arc, but let me give you 2 scenarios. First scenario, you have a team and you come in as a facilitator and you say, all right, team, what do we need to do better? And the team looks back at you with a stare and goes, I don't know, this last sprint was pretty good. Well, what can we do better? Come on, think of something. Come on, come up with a good idea. How do we get better? Come on, give me something. And nothing comes out. Compare that to a retrospective where they come in and the leader sets the stage, they gather data, they generate insights, they decide what to do, and then they close the retrospectives. It's similar to following this arc in a coaching conversation. What it does is it leads the team through an experience that allows them to unlock deeper insights than if you'd have just said to them, what do you want to fix? Because here's the reality. In coaching, if we can just fix our problems, right? If we could just say, oh, I'm overweight, or oh, I need to work out more, or oh, I really want to travel to this other country. And if we could just snap our fingers and fix our problems, then we wouldn't necessarily need coaches. But a lot of times we get blocked, we get stuck in a rut because we see the world a certain way. And sometimes our challenges seem insurmountable. Oh, I don't know if we can look at that. So imagine, if you will, you've got a mountain in front of you and you look at that mountain and you say, there's no way I could ever get over that mountain. It's just too high to go up and it's dangerous and there's peaks and valleys and I just don't want to go over that mountain. But what if someone came along and said, hey, come with me, step over to your right or to your left and look around the mountain, and you can actually stay on ground level and safely go around it. That path was always there, but your perspective at the beginning was all you saw was the mountain. But if someone comes and gives you a different perspective, you can see a new way of looking at a challenge. And if you can see it in a new light, you can come up with new solutions that you might not have seen before. So what is our challenge as facilitators? It is to give our teams and individuals, if you're coaching an individual, an opportunity to see their problems and challenges in a different light, so they can come up with effective ideas and experiments to try to improve on them over time. All right, so that's what we want to do as a facilitator, and it takes time to build each of these phases. I'm going to very quickly go through the 5 phases, and I have some activities. I don't think I'll have time to share the activities, but they're all here. You can just Google the names and look up how to do them, but I'll give you some of those activities as we go through these. Really quickly, I want to show you these icons. I will briefly try to touch on remote versus in-person retrospectives. At the moment, most of our retrospectives are remote. Previous to the pandemic, hopefully you were able to have the experience of in-person retrospectives. The dynamics are a little bit different. And so where I can, I do want to touch on that just a little bit, because it's important to set the stage and create the environment for the team, whether you're using virtual, in-person, or a mixture of both. And then lastly, small versus at scale. If you've got a team of 4 or 5 people, it will be different to run a retrospective than if you have a team of 15, 20, 50, 100. If you're doing a scaled retrospective, it will be very different. So briefly, I want to touch on those a little bit as I have time and I can. So, all right, we're going to move to next phase. So quick time check. We're doing reasonably good on time. So phase 1, set the stage. What are you doing on phase 1, set the stage? You're creating the environment. Now I'll tell you, I've seen on LinkedIn recently quite a bit of disagreement with the idea of we need to make our retrospectives fun, or having an icebreaker is a good way to start a retrospective. And realistically, these people are saying is just get down to business. Don't take the time to try to make us have fun or make it feel a certain way. So I'm going to challenge that, because we're people, we're humans. And the reality is each of us comes into every meeting we come into. You came into this session today with whatever mental state you've been carrying throughout your previous couple of hours. Now, hopefully you've been at the conference, you've been going to wonderful sessions, so you came into this session just on fire, loving all the things you're learning and ready to learn more. But unfortunately, if you think about a normal work environment, most people are doing, heads down work. They have frustrations with their boss, maybe with their coworker, maybe they're uncomfortable in their working situation, maybe they're trying to solve a problem they can't get over. They have this sense of work, and I'm focused, I'm in the zone, and I got to deliver, I've got to earn that paycheck, I don't want to get fired. And then they come into your retro. And if you just jump into your retro, all right, guys, let's start, then you get lower energy, you get decreased satisfaction, you get honestly distracted people. And I've seen this, maybe you've seen it. It's the inevitable phone pops up and the person, oh, I've got this work thing I'm working on. What that tells me is that you failed to grab their attention and transition them from work into the retrospective you're trying to do. So while I wouldn't just say just do an icebreaker, you do need to spend some time at the beginning of your meeting creating the environment for success for a retro. A retro is a different kind of meeting than other business meetings your team members are going to have. So a couple of ideas. I've got one word, clean language, on here. If you haven't heard of clean language, it's a lot of fun way of understanding, talking to people. I will show you this one, constellations, one of my favorite. I built this in Miro. You can build it in other tools or do it on sticky notes. What you simply do is put a statement down here, right? This one, I am creative. And then you have your team members move their names close to it if it's true for them, or far away if it's not true for them. And then you let the team pick the next one, right? I like to make, I love reading. Let's pull that one in. I love reading. Oh, Tim really loves reading. Lisa doesn't. What are we doing here? We're creating a moment of humanity, a moment of being able to engage with a person, not in a purely business context. What does it do? It does lighten the meeting. It does help us have fun. And it does help clear the mental slate. If you think of your mind as a whiteboard, clear away some of the frustrations of whatever meeting the person just came from, so that they can be truly ready to participate in your retrospective. I've got some other ideas here. You've got a Team Radar, a great list of icebreakers from Range right there that you can go look at. They have wonderful icebreakers available. So all of these things are useful, but the takeaway for set the stage is create a transition from wherever the person came from into your retrospective. Then you move into phase 2, gather data. All right. So you don't want to just come in and say, what do we fix, team? You want to uncover areas that the team wants to talk about. Now, if you think about it, there's this pattern we talk about as coaches called diverge, converge. At the beginning of a retrospective, you want to diverge the people's thinking, and you want them to think very wide. You want them to think if we could talk about this, or this, right? So you want to get ideas for topics you can discuss. One great way to start is, were there action items from your last retro? Sometimes teams have trouble keeping action items in front of themselves. You should always look back and do a quick check-in when you're gathering data. How did we do on our action items from our last retro? Do we need to discuss those? Do we need to change those? How can we make our action items more effective? And then you want to bring in hard versus soft data, right? So hard data is counts and numbers and stories completed, right? You could bring that in, target stories versus what we actually completed. Or you could bring in soft data. How's everybody feeling? There was a change in management. What do you guys think about that? And access a range of emotions that enable your team to look from the left to the right. What are some areas that we could talk about that are going to be useful for our purposes here? I will warn you, sometimes when you diverge and you go wide, someone wants to talk about, boy, there was this car on the road on my way into work. Okay, that's not helpful. That's not going to improve the team. That's not going to improve the way we work together. So as you're diverging, it's your job as a facilitator, don't let the conversation diverge too wildly from the ultimate goal. And what's the ultimate goal? We want to have good conversation. We want to come away with at least one experiment to make the team better. So keep the team kind of on track with conversation and topics that can move them in that general direction. If someone wants to talk about their pet, that would be a much better for set the stage at the previous phase than here. Here we're gathering data, trying to identify areas we can look at for our team that are going to make us better as we go forward. A couple activities you could do to work through this. Number one is lean coffee. Lean coffee is a great way of getting your team to just brain dump and say, here are some ideas that we have. These are some ways that we can talk about this topic or that topic. If you've never experienced a lean coffee before, Mark Kilby writes an excellent article on lean coffee. I highly recommend you go read that article, and that can help guide you there. Sailboat is a very useful activity. You can basically use it to help guide your team. I've got a couple images here of one of the teams I worked with doing sailboat, and they had here, you draw a picture and then you have people create sticky notes that say, what are our anchors? What are our sails? And you can add other things, right? What are our risks from the rocks, and what's the paradise that we're headed towards? But that's a great way of getting the team to think about areas they need to dive deeper into. So look at all these sticky notes. This was a large group, by the way. This was a massive diverge, right? So what did we do? We took all these sticky notes and then narrowed them down and said, what are the top 5, the top 4, the top 3 that we want to talk about? And then we dove into those. So we diverge and then we converge. So this is a great activity for that. And then lastly, timeline is really useful. You can have the team rebuild the timeline, right? From the start of your last sprint to the end of your last sprint, what was amazing or positive or what was negative and crushing, right? And then you can have people put notes, sticky notes on that timeline. And then you can say, which of these could we maybe address and improve, right? And again, the idea is we're setting the stage for what we can come into and do a deep dive on to try to get to that one experiment that's going to be useful for us. All right. Okay. So back down here, generating insights. We're moving along. Generating insights. You've now set the stage. We've talked about possible topics. We've created a plethora of ideas. It is time to really begin to focus down on the things that we want to talk about. Okay. You cannot take 8 items forward from the previous phase. You can't even really take 4. I'll tell you about a recent retrospective I did. We did a fishbone diagram. We drove out a fishbone, but we had 5, 6 different topics that we pulled forward. We only got into 1, and we had wonderful conversation because that one was the most important one that resonated with everyone. So we dove into that one very deeply, and it was in that one that we saw great conversation and great feedback come out. So don't bring forward everything from a previous phase. Do some kind of dot voting or polling, or ask the team to talk about them, to narrow it down to say, what are we going to do a deep dive in? What are we going to converge on and actually try to get some information about? So phase 3 is generating insights. You want to understand the data causes, like what is it that is causing this to happen, these conditions, whether it's positive or negative. What is causing those conditions? You can use 5 whys. If you've never heard of 5 whys, It's a wonderful tool of diving deeper, or you can use Fishbone. I briefly mentioned Fishbone, Ishikawa diagram. You can use that to break down your problems. Also, you want to come away from here with a potential hypothesis, right? We think we can make this better, or if it was something that was good, we think we can keep this going forward, right? If we do X, Y, or Z. So come up with a hypothesis of how you can continue or advance things that are good, or decrease or stop things that were bad. Keep in mind, our target is we want to come away from this retrospective with an experiment that we can run. Lastly, this is the art of what's possible. Don't let the team get stuck in, we've tried that, it doesn't work. This is too hard, blah, blah, blah. Ask the team to think openly, think with wisdom. What is possible as a team? What could we possibly do to make our experience better as a team as we go forward? And then even dream of the ideal future. A couple of activities you could do there. I mentioned hypothesis and experiment, but genie in a bottle is a great way. Imagine we had a genie in a bottle and we had a wish and we can move it forward. This is similar to the magic wand question. You would ask customers, if you had a magic wand and you could make anything happen, what kind of things would you want to have happen? Now you may get some responses here where people say, oh, we would get $1 million per week as a employee. Okay. Well, let's keep things maybe a little more realistic in the next phase. But what we want to get here is a sense of where is the team needing to move? Are they needing to move a lot in a direction, a little in a direction? Are they needing to move over here, over here? Help the team dream a little of the experience that will best benefit them as they go forward. And now we carry into the next phase. The next phase is deciding what to do. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we start planning actions that we are going to take. All right. So team ownership. Number one, the team needs to own the entire retrospective, but they've got to own this phase, because if they're going to make these things happen, they need to be the ones who say, this is an action that will benefit us and we are going to do it. You as a Scrum Master cannot own all the improvement experiments that your team is doing. You may have a couple of action items, go talk to this person outside the team, see if you can get the team this new tool or technology, but you can't own the week over week, sprint after sprint, iteration improvements that the team feels is going to make them better. The ownership has to be with them. They have to be the ones wanting to strive to be better. And they might say, but we don't have any control over getting better. That's where I would introduce circles and soup. This is one of the most effective tools in helping teams feel in control of their own destiny. Recognize this. There is a center of this diagram. Draw this diagram for your team, put it on your tool, and say, there are some things that we directly influence. What time we show up to our meetings? Do we show up on time? How many emails we will send to each other as a team? What we are going to, how we're going to talk to each other when we're doing our sprint planning. Are we going to argue, or are we going to be respectful? These are things the team can directly influence. They can do it themselves. Then there's things beyond that that the team can indirectly influence. Talking to a manager, asking for a change in tool set. You have to talk to another tech organization, right? There are things you can indirectly influence. And then there's things that are beyond your influence. Who the CEO is, what the traffic is like on your way to work. These are things that you can't control, and you just got to realize that that's what we call the soup. And so one thing I found useful, a team comes up with a whole bunch of things. Oh, we want to fix this, and this. Is plot those on this circle and say, which ones can we directly influence and which ones can we indirectly influence and which ones are beyond our influence as a team right now. And you want to make sure your activities and your experiments live in the direct influence world, because those are the things your team is going to be able to own actually making happen. All right. So if you say, well, my team is pretty advanced, they've done everything they can in direct influence, everything now lies indirect or beyond. This is the point where a team has gotten mature. They've handled all their stuff internally. And what I would suggest that team start doing is increasing their circle of direct influence. If you think about it, I have a young baby. He's a toddler right now, just at 16 months old. And when he's young, he doesn't really directly influence a whole lot. He screams and cries and wants things and asks for things. And there's a lot of things that we do for him. But as he grows and matures as an individual, his circle of direct influence is going to grow. He's going to start dressing himself. He's going to start feeding himself. He's going to start making money for himself. He's going to live as a functioning human. That's his direct influence growing. That's maturity. As your team grows in maturity, their direct influence should increase so that their ownership they should be able to own a lot more things. I won't talk about 3x3 agreement. I'm going to try to bring this all home. Closing the retrospective. Last phase, don't skip this. You need to set time at the end of your retrospective to ask the team occasionally, not every sprint, but ask them for a retro on the retro. Is it effective for them? Is it meeting their needs? Are there ways we can do it better? Sometimes you've been looking at the team and retrospecting on the team. Sometimes you should stop and retrospect on your retros. That's part of inspecting your own retros. Get the team to help you with that. Create space to celebrate. You want to celebrate wins, celebrate team members, make it positive. You want to have team appreciation. Have your team practice the art of being thankful to each other, being nice to each other. It's healthy for the team, and you're going to become better as a unit. I've got some quotes and stuff on documentations and checking out, but the point is you want to transition out of the retrospective, just like you transitioned in, you want to transition out so they can go back to work. All right, so lastly, pulling this whole thing together, it really takes a community. It takes your team to inspect your retrospective. You can't inspect and improve your retrospectives without your team, but you also should work with a coach, community of practice, go to external meetups, talk to other internal Agilists, be involved on LinkedIn in your community, because as you want to grow in your retrospective practice, you need to be talking to other people, because you can only experience the retrospectives that you're in, but you can learn from retrospectives other people have experienced. So my father used to always tells me, a wise man learns from his own mistakes, a wiser man still the mistakes of others. So take the opportunity to learn from your team, but also learn from your community. I also threw in the retrospective prime directive, a few links for extras, but we should be right at about 30 minutes into this talk. And so we should be moving over into
So we have 10
Q&A.
minutes in hand, Isaac. We are, I think, well on time. Yep.
Perfect.
And in a couple of minutes, I'll also float the poll.
Perfect. That's wonderful. All right, guys, so let's switch over then to Q&A. Now, listen, again, I covered a lot of ground. I did not go into detail on all the activities, but I covered a lot of ground because of the time frame. But I'd love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any follow-up questions. But for now, I'm going to pull everybody over to the feedback, session feedback, if you're in the Miro board. And if you wouldn't mind putting some feedback there, we will do a poll in a second. But let's do questions. Anybody have any questions? Anything I can just specifically maybe answer for you about retrospectives?
Yeah, Isaac, there's a question from Paulamy. I hope I'm loud and clear.
Okay.
So she asks, hi, Isaac, mostly in retrospective, I find a lot of people keeping quiet. How to include them?
Excellent. That's a fantastic question. And so people not talking, that's a common challenge.